After a regional championships, I always want to know what happened, but I don't always want to watch a 12-hour stream. So, in today's video, I'm going to be doing a summary of everything that happened at the Louisville Regional Championships. The Louisville Regional Championships had a very diverse metagame with plenty of decks hovering around the 10% mark. Raging Bolt was a cut above the rest at around 14%, with Terapagos, Dragapult, Lugia, Regidrago, and Palkia all around the 11 to 8% range. The biggest surprise to me here is that Charizard didn't even make it into the top 6 decks. I would have expected Charizard to be in the top 3, and yet it was nowhere to be seen. Seemingly into this metagame, it would have been pretty weak with a rough Dragapult, Regidrago, and Origin Form Palkia matchup. It's no wonder the deck didn't see too much success. Getting into our first match of the video, we're going to be starting off at round 4, where we've got Blake, who's playing Klawf, up against Jim, who's playing Okidogi. Jim is ultimately going to be the first person to get an attack off, which is huge in these one prize matchups. After this, the players go back and forth, scoring one prize knockouts until Jim eventually brings up Blake's Pheasantipede EX and knocks it out, taking a 2 prize lead in the game. At this point, Blake scoops it up, and we head on to a game 2. In the second game, Blake is the one to take the lead using Klawf's Unhinged Scissors attack on turn 2. Jim tries to use Counter Catcher to buy some time, but Blake has a switch card in hand and is able to take a 2 prize lead. This lead is reduced to 1 with some Legacy Energy shenanigans, which eventually get knocked out anyways with Poison. For those of you who don't know, Legacy Energy only prevents the prize card being drawn by damage from an attack, so effects like poison and damage counters allow you to take a prize card regardless. As time winds down, Blake barely misses his attack and is forced to be turn 0 of time, meaning he is not able to draw his 3 prizes in the next 2 turns. These one prize matchups typically take a long time as both players need to get 6 knockouts in order to win the game. So, a little lesson for everyone watching that if you're playing one of these one prize matchups, be sure to keep up the pace. Our 5th round is going to feature some more prominent meta decks with Regidrago facing off against Charizard Pidgeot. Additionally, a familiar face in Lucas Xing is going to be facing off against a prominent Japanese player, Haruki Miwa. The series kicks off with Haruki donking Lucas in Game 1, and we move on to Game 2, where Lucas goes first and both players have solid openings. The game kicks off on Lucas's second turn of the game, where he's able to set up a Regidrago V-Star and use Phantom Dive. He does have to use his V-Star power in order to accomplish this, but it establishes him a 2 prize lead. The most interesting decision of this turn is whether to knock out the Pidgey or the Duskull. Lucas thinks about it for a while and ultimately decides to knock out the Duskull because Rare Candy Charizard plus Dusclops would be enough to knock out his only Regidrago V-Star. Since Haruki's Duskull was knocked out, his only response here is to pull off a Radzard with 3 Fire Energies and a Defiance Band. This play is fairly difficult to pull off, but he actually manages to draw all the pieces, playing his hand down to 0, rare candying out a Pidgeot and a Charizard, and attacking with Radzard. Although he has 0 cards in hand, his board is incredibly stable. If Lucas knocks out his Pidgeot, he still has 2 attackers on the board, and if Lucas knocks out any of his attackers, then he has a Pidgeot. This is the strength of Charizard Pidgeot and why these cards work together so well. Lucas responds by using Loss Impact to knock out Haruki's Pidgeot. This significantly limits Haruki's options and maintains the pace of the 2 prize card exchange. If Lucas is able to knock out Haruki's Rotom or his Charizard EX on the following turn of the game, either using Radiant Charizard to kill the Rotom or an Ogerpon to kill the Charizard, he'll be able to win the game before Haruki. However, Haruki drew Professor Turo's Scenario off the prize cards, allowing him to remove Rotom from play and forcing Lucas to knock out the Charizard EX in order to win the game. This is significantly harder than knocking out the Rotom, as he's going to need 4 energies on a Grass Ogerpon instead of just 1 Fire Energy on Radiant Charizard. Lucas is also down all 4 of his energy switch at this point, making this play literally impossible. So Lucas takes the turn, attaches 2 energies to his Ogerpon, and passes the turn, taking advantage of the fact that Radiant Charizard cannot attack 2 turns in a row. Haruki, having no Pidgeot and an unplayable hand, has to pass, allowing Lucas an opportunity to win the game. If he had Grass Energy and Boss's Orders, he would be able to bring in the Charizard and win the game. However, his Grass Energy is stuck in the bottom 2 cards of his deck. Without the necessary energy to attack, he passes back the turn again to Haruki. Again, with the Charizard EX now stuck in the active and Haruki's hand being completely unplayable, he is just forced to pass with this Charizard EX in the active. Interestingly, he does decide to bench Rotom and draw 3 cards, looking for a Fire Energy or any other way to get this Charizard out of the active and win the game on the next turn. Lucas, with a 50% chance, then top decks the Grass Energy he needs in order to knock out the Charizard and close out a little bit of a scuffed Game 2. In Game 3, Haruki has a miserable turn 1, essentially making this game play as if Lucas went first. He gets a reasonable setup with a couple energies in play and passes it back to Haruki, who has about as insane of a turn 2 as you can have after passing with a Pidgey and Pheasantipede in play. He makes a Pidgeot, fills his board, and puts Mist Energy on Duskull, protecting it from Phantom Dive. Lucas responds with a strong turn of his own, setting up a Kyurem attack without using his V-Star power. This is a common theme from Regidrago V-Star, that you never want to use Kyurem on the second turn of the game if you have to flip your V-Star. Because Lucas hasn't used his V-Star power, his board has much more stability, being able to activate his V-Star power on the next turn in order to maintain an attack. Otherwise, if he had to discard all of his energies and activate his V-Star power, it'd be very likely he wouldn't be able to attack on the next turn. Haruki then responds with a Radiant Charizard Thornton play similar to Game 2. This time, the play is not as strong as he has to use Prime Catcher in order to knock out Ogerpon and is unable to use Defiance Band to knock out Regidrago V-Star. This allows Lucas to use his V-Star power on the following turn in order to set up a strong play. Lucas does just that, using his V-Star power to set up for a Phantom Dive with the Prime Catcher in hand, with the intention of next turn being able to use Radiant Charizard to knock out Pidgeot or Pheasantipede. Haruki, seeing this coming, goes for a very intricate line. He plays Iono, brings up Lucas's Pheasantipede, and begins to pass. If Haruki were to knock out this Pheasantipede, Lucas would win the game with a simple Boss's Orders. But by not knocking out this Pheasantipede, Haruki forces Lucas to draw into a Boss's Orders and an energy card. Prime Catcher would win Lucas the game, but Haruki knows that he just Iono'd the Prime Catcher to the bottom of Lucas's deck. Additionally, this doesn't open up a bench spot for something like a potential Miwa EX, and Lucas, with an unplayable hand off the Iono, is forced to pass. Haruki is then looking to Rare Candy a Dusknoir, knock out the Noctowl, and use Briar to take a 4-prize turn. However, he's 1 turn short, so he has to pass it over to Lucas, allowing Lucas 1 more chance to top deck out of it. Lucas top decks a dead card, passes over the turn, and Haruki is able to win the game with a pretty sweet Dusknoir Briar combo. It didn't look like Lucas drew Boss's Orders off that Iono, but this is an example of an elite player making a strong play and maximizing their odds to win. Moving on to round 6, we have Hunter Butler versus Henry Chao, your Baltimore regional champion. Henry Chao is rocking his Gardevoir Rare Candy deck again with no Manaphy up against Hunter Butler's Turbo Lost Box. Game 1 starts off with a very quick donk. Cramorant takes out a Ralts, and we're going to go into Game 2, where Henry is going to get to go first. Henry opens Klawf, which is going to be the key to the matchup, slowing Hunter down and giving Henry a chance to evolve before his Curlias get knocked out by Radiant Greninja. That's exactly what we see happen as Hunter has a slow turn 1, attaching to Radiant Greninja, playing a Colress's Experiment, and passing the turn back over to Henry. This allows Henry to initiate the prize trade in a matchup where he is usually going to be a lot slower. Once Hunter has access to his abilities, he wastes no time prime catching up the Gardevoir EX and using Radiant Greninja to target the bench. Notice how he knocks out 2 Pokemon that don't have any Psychic Energies on them, leaving all of Henry's Psychic Energies trapped on Screamtail. Without any access to Psychic Energy in the discard, and without any refinements to discard any energies, all Henry can do is play an Iono and pass. Hunter capitalizes on this by using another Radiant Greninja attack, knocking out Ralts and Klawf, and putting Henry in a really rough spot. Down 3 prizes, Hunter is threatening to win the game on the next turn with Roaring Moon EX. In order to get this Gardevoir EX out of the active, Henry uses Secret Box, his patented A-Spec, to search out Professor Turo and a couple of other key pieces. He then Turos up his Screamtail, freeing up his energy, and uses Counter Catcher to knock out Hunter's Roaring Moon, which was threatening to win the game by knocking out his Gardevoir EX. Running low on resources, Hunter decks himself out and uses Super Rod to recover a couple of energy cards and a Blood Moon Ursaluna. After this, he uses Lost Vacuum to knock out the Drifloon and punches the Gardevoir EX with Spit innocently. Henry, realizing he can never win this game on prizes, Night Stretches for Klawf, puts a Bravery Charm on it, and passes the turn, hoping that Hunter doesn't have enough resources to knock it out. Hunter plays Mirage Gate and is about to try and knock out the Klawf with Radiant Greninja when he realizes that Bravery Charm puts it out of range. By playing the Mirage Gate, Hunter decked himself out, so he scoops the match. Even if he didn't play the Mirage Gate, he was simply out of resources and could never kill Klawf. And just like that, Henry Chao steals a game which he had no business winning. Heading into Game 3, Hunter gets the opportunity to go first, putting a card in the Lost Zone and using Radiant Greninja's ability before Henry has the opportunity to retreat into Klawf. Henry does just that on his first turn, retreats into Klawf and passes. Hunter then has an absurdly broken turn 2 using Radiant Greninja, multiple Lost Vacuums and Colress in order to activate Mirage Gate and knock out Henry's Klawf and Ralts. In response, Henry rare candies out a Gardevoir in order to get an attack off and knock out this Radiant Greninja. He also plays an Iono in order to disrupt Hunter's hand. Unfazed by the disruption, Hunter sets up a Roaring Moon and one-shots Henry's Gardevoir EX, putting him down to just 2 prizes. With this Roaring Moon threatening to win the game on the next turn, Henry plays another Iono and knocks out the Roaring Moon with Drifloon. However, again unfazed by disruption, Hunter uses Prime Catcher and Blood Moon Ursaluna in order to knock out Henry's Pheasantipity and win the game. On to round 7, we see another familiar face in Piper Lepine facing off against Austin Ellis. Piper is going to be piloting a very interesting Bannette Gardevoir deck, while Austin is playing a very standard Terapagos deck. In the first game, Piper goes first, but is unable to get off the turn 2 Bannette attack and has to settle for flipping a coin on Shuppet's attack. She flips tails, allowing Austin a chance to get in the game. However, since he prized his Pidgeot EX, he's really unable to capitalize. Without a Pidgeot EX, he's going to be unable to search for double turbo energies for the entire game. He uses Prime Catcher to knock out Piper's only Curlia, trying to stun her draw power. This works somewhat as he's able to dodge a Counter Catcher, but Piper does find a Bannette EX, allowing her to establish that item lock. With not much going on in hand, Austin just attacks. After this, Piper begins setting up her core strategy of Counter Catcher and boss spamming random Pokemon and forcing Austin to have one of his 4 double turbo energies in order to retreat. This time he does have a double turbo energy, allowing him to retreat and attack. And on Piper's next turn, she actually makes a rare mistake, using Okidogi to knock out Austin's Duskull before playing Counter Catcher, means that she's not able to gust this turn. This allows Austin to take 2 free prizes on the Bannette EX and go down to 3 remaining. However, these prize cards are going to prove irrelevant as Piper uses another Counter Catcher, brings up Austin's Hoot Hoot, plays an Iono, and sets up the lock. Without a Pidgeot EX in play and without a Double Turbo Energy in hand, Austin is locked out of the game, and Piper begins to set up her perfect board. She establishes 2 Monkey Dories and starts retreating her Bannettes every turn in order to get damage for Adrenabrain. This allows her to snipe off Austin's Duskull and then eventually knock out the Hoot Hoot as well. Once she's down to 3 prize cards, she brings up Austin's Terapagos, knocks it out with Gardevoir EX, and sets up a checkmate position. Austin scoops shortly afterwards, and we head on to Game 2. In Game 2, Austin prizes his Pidgeot EX again, meaning that he won't have consistent access to Double Turbo Energy. This proves irrelevant as Piper flips heads on Shuppet's Enveloping Shadow attack, meaning that Austin wouldn't have been able to set up a Pidgeot EX anyways. Without the ability to retreat and attack, Austin just passes over the turn, at which point Piper sets up the Bannette EX and solidifies her item lock strategy. After this, Austin uses Boss's Orders, knocking out Piper's Monkey Dory, but the writing for this game is already on the wall as early as turn 3, as Piper begins to use Counter Catcher to bring up Hoot Hoots and execute her stalling strategy. This time, Austin draws the Double Turbo Energy, allowing him to retreat and attack. However, Piper immediately plays another Gusting effect, bringing up Austin's Hoot Hoot and trapping it in the active. From here, Piper begins to set up Gardevoir EX and Monkey Dory and starts retreating her Bannettes in order to get damage in play for Adrenabrain. Piper eventually knocks out all of Austin's frail Pokémon and then one-shots his Terapagos EX with a powerful Poltergeist, putting her down to 1 prize and setting up somewhat of a checkmate. Austin eventually gets to attack with Terapagos EX, but it's too late, as Piper uses Miwa EX and Radiant Alakazam to copy Blood Moon Ursaluna's attack and knock it out for the game. And our final round of day 1, Swiss round 8, is going to be Ian Robb versus Xander Pero. You can see Ian playing Palkia and Xander playing Raging Bolt. Now, on surface level, this matchup is whoever gets the first 2 prize knockout, but we actually see a really interesting series from these players. Game 1 kicks off with Ian going first and getting a relatively strong turn 1 board. Xander then whiffs the turn 1 attack, putting Ian in the driver's seat. He pops a Dusknoir and knocks out Xander's Ogerpon with Palkia V-Star, putting him up in the prize trade. Xander then responds with a knockout onto the Palkia V-Star, but has to bench a couple liabilities in the Fezandipiti EX and the Ogerpon. Ian then pops off Crazy, using 2 Dusknoirs to knock out Xander's Ogerpon and Prime Catcher to bring up his Fezandipiti in order to take a 4 prize turn on the 3rd turn of the game. This is the power of these Dusknoir decks, both Terapagos and Palkia, showing why this card is such a force. Heading into Game 2, Xander gets to go first and gets a reasonable start, getting a couple energies in play. Xander uses Boss's Orders in order to take a 2 prize knockout on Fezandipiti, but was unable to get 4 energies in play in order to knock out the Palkia V, which would have ended the game on the spot. Still in a solid position, taking a 2 prize lead is nothing to scoff at. Ian follows up by doing 220 damage to the Raging Bolt EX, and benches an army of Duskulls. Xander then whips the attack and has to just use Burst Roar and use Pokemon Catcher in order to stall out Ian's Squawkabilly. Ian capitalizes on this by using Prime Catcher to bring in Xander's Ogerpon, and activates Curse Blast to knock out his other Raging Bolt, taking a similar prize lead to Game 1. Before you click off this video, assuming this game is done, Xander actually puts together a brilliant combo. He puts Bravery Charm on every single one of his 2 prize Pokemon, denying Ian from being able to use Blood Moon to win the game. This turn alone goes to show why Xander played 4 Bravery Charm in his Raging Bolt list. Without a way to win the game, Ian uses Night Stretcher to bring back Froakie, with the intention of using Greninja EX to knock out Fezandipiti on the next turn as it's weak to fighting. Xander quickly gets the required energy in play and knocks out Ian's Fezandipiti for the game. Moving into Game 3, Ian has the ability to go first and shows off his Klefki tech, which I imagine is in there for this specific matchup. He puts Klefki in the active on turn 1, but Xander is the greatest Pokemon player ever and top decks Prime Catcher, allowing him to bring up Ian's Palkia and knock it out on turn 1. Ian responds by making a Greninja EX, the bulkiest Pokemon in his deck, requiring Xander to use 5 energies in order to knock it out, and gets some damage on the board with Shinobi Blade. Xander then uses Pokestop, discarding his 3rd Professor Sawdust, and then plays his 4th Professor Sawdust in order to get this knockout on Greninja EX. Additionally, he discarded Palpad on turn 1 with Squawkabilly EX, meaning that he has no access to Professor Sawdust for the rest of the game, putting him in an awkward position despite being up 4 prizes. Ian, realizing this, is content to just hit this Raging Bolt for 240 damage, knowing that Xander is unable to attack and win the game. At this point, Xander's most likely win condition is to use Teal Mask Ogerpon to attack, either 2-shotting a Palkia V-Star or knocking out 2 1-prize Pokemon. Back over to Ian's turn, he simply knocks out the Raging Bolt, going down to 4 prizes remaining. Xander then uses Teal Mask Ogerpon and Boss's Orders in order to bring up Duskull and knock it out, going down to 1 prize. At this point, he is completely out of every resource, including energies and Sawdust. All he has left in his deck is a single copy of Pokemon Catcher, which he's hoping to use to close out the game. At this point, time is called in the match, which is somewhat relevant as Ian could have won the game here by just boss stalling Raging Bolt EX. Instead, Ian uses Counter Catcher on the Raging Bolt and has to knock it out if he wants to try and win the game. By knocking out the Raging Bolt, it allows Xander to promote Ogerpon, use Fezandipiti, Pokestop, and Teal Dance to deck himself out, and flip a Baller Heads on Pokemon Catcher to win the round. Closing out the day 1 action, we see Benjamin Herbert, John Eng, and Jack Moore all rocking Regidrago V-Star. We've got Caleb Gediver and Mustafa Taba playing Raging Bolt, and we have Kieran Farah rocking the 8-0 with Lugia. Henry Chao also in the top 16 after day 1, rocking his signature Gardevoir deck from the Baltimore Regionals. And we see a Lost Box deck at 701 in Tyler Matthews. If you're interested in seeing a recap of the second day of competition, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications as I'll have that video coming out in the next couple of days. Other than that, I'll see you guys in the next video.